Hey guys, what's good? Welcome back to JDB Selects. Sorry for no video last week. Life has been getting pretty hectic, just like the football last week. Oh my days, 5 games, 5 underdogs all getting up, the first time since 2018. An absolutely mental round of football. And don't worry if you got 0 out of 5 on your tips. I've seen plenty of screenshots on social media today. You are certainly not alone. Before we get into this week's video, I do just want to give our free Discord server a massive plug. Despite the crazy results, we still turned profit in both our Selects VIP and just free tip package. We're up over 140 units year to date, with most of those coming from our free JDB official picks, which I drop before each game, each and every week, for completely free, no strings attached, no BS. So if you aren't a member of our Discord server and want a place where you can chat footy, chat punts, get some tips, share some bets, have some fun, this is the one-stop shop. The only place you need to go is to our Discord server, which you can do by scanning the QR code on screen or heading to the link in the video description. Now let's talk a bit of footy. I tell you what, on Thursday night, once the Dolphins beat the Bulldogs, I thought, you know what? I've got it. I've got the perfect 5 out of 5 this week. I've tipped the massive upset. Here we go. And then, as we all know, the 4 other underdogs got up as well. So a really disappointing result with only 1 out of 5 correct. I had the Raiders all week, and then I flipped last minute to my Warriors, which in hindsight, one tip ain't going to change the world. But man, 1 out of 5, disappointing. Leaves us at 57% for the season. But what that does mean is hopefully we can only go up this week. Now, if you don't know by now, we do run a JDB Selects tipping comp. All the details to join are shown on screen. 3 great prizes, free entry, you know the drill. Get in there if you are keen to give it a crack. And speaking of the tipping comp, Jordan Hill still maintains first position on our ladder, now 2 points clear of the nearest competition in Run It Straight 274. The King is on, 95 Warrior, Ronan, Pelican Man, J Jamio, all right there. Plenty to play for. I think we still have about 15 weeks of football left, so that can certainly change in an instant. Much like the NRL ladder, the tipping ladder is also extremely close. 1 or 2 games really does swing you, 20 to 30 places up or down. Very, very slim margins, but congrats again, Jordan Hill. 3 out of 5 last week, pretty decent result. Good luck to you and the rest of you guys. Here are my personal tips and predictions for round number 13. Alright, round 13 gets underway on Friday night this week because we do have Origin Game 1 this Wednesday, and we do start with the 10th placed St. George Illawarra Dragons taking on the 14th placed Newcastle Knights at Jubilee Stadium. Alright, and if we start first with the Dragons, who will be fresh off their second bye of the season, but the week prior edged out the Brisbane Broncos 30 points to 26 in a thrilling, high-scoring contest at Suncorp Stadium. The first half saw the Broncos jump to an early 12-point lead, but the Dragons clawed it back, narrowing the gap to 12-4 by half-time. The second half was a seesaw affair, with the lead changing hands multiple times, and despite being reduced to 12 men at one point, the Dragons stunned the home crowd by taking the lead during the numerical disadvantage, with Jacob Little's remarkable 70-metre solo try proving to be a turning point in that second half. The Saints came into the match with just 3 wins from their opening 9 games, yet showed impressive resilience and desire, spearheaded by co-captain Clint Gutherson, who ran for 233 metres with 2 tries and 8 tackle breaks, further cementing his place as one of the buys of the season. The win also further reaffirmed their position as Brisbane's bogey team, having now won 8 of the last 10 encounters against the Broncos. And in terms of teams list for St. George, Dylan Egan picked up a season-ending injury against the Broncos, likely elevating Luciano Leilua to the starting side. Christian Tuipulotu, Matt Fine and Emre Gula are all potential ins for St. George. And as for the Knights, they delivered a commanding first 40 minutes to secure a 25 to 6 point victory over the Penrith Panthers at Carrington Park. The Knights set the tone early, with fullback Fletcher Sharp crossing for his 8th try of the season in just the 4th minute, starring with 4 line breaks and an impressive 17 tackle breaks throughout the match. The opening 25 minutes were dominated by second rower Dylan Lucas, who completed the first half hat-trick, his first in the NRL, thanks to deft playmaking by 5/8 Tyson Gamble, who contributed 3 try assists with 2 short balls and a perfectly weighted kick. Newcastle's relentless pressure saw them surge to a 24-0 lead at halftime, and they were able to defend their way to their 4th win of the season, with Newcastle only missing 25 tackles to Penrith's 56. I don't really know what to make of that performance given the players missing for the Panthers, but what it does do is leave the Knights well within striking distance of the top 8, only a few points behind. And in terms of teams list for Newcastle, Kalen Ponga will play fullback for Queensland on Wednesday night, but should be fine to back up should he be willing and able. Adam Elliott picked up a bicep injury against Penrith and will miss some game time. Leo Thompson, though, should be okay to return from illness this week. Looking at the two sides head-to-head, the Dragons, they have won 10 of the last 15 games against the Knights. The Knights, they've also only beaten the Saints once at Jubilee Stadium since 2009. And so because of that and for a few other reasons, I do like the St. George Dragons here by 1 to 12 points. I think last week was a fairly decent showing from the Knights, although it was against a C-grade Penrith unit. I think the Dragons, they've shown far more this season, especially in terms of scoring points, and I think they will be too strong at home, fresh off a bye. Alright, moving now to the first of 3 games on Saturday this week, and we do start first with the 16th placed Gold Coast Titans hosting the 4th placed Melbourne Storm at Cbus Super Stadium. Alright, starting first with the Titans, who had their second bye of the season last week, but suffered a heavy loss to the Raiders in round 11, 40 points to 24. The Gold Coast started brightly, with Jojo Fafita crossing in the opening minutes to give the visitors an early lead, but once again were unable to stay up for the 80 minutes. The Titans' defensive line was tested repeatedly, with Jamal Fogarty and Matt Timmaker finding gaps to keep the scoreboard ticking over for the Raiders. Kieran Foran made his first appearance of the season, and while he wasn't perfect, I thought he brought a much more improved organisation to a fairly inexperienced side. The Titans will continue to search for answers, but the effort from Tino, Campbell and Fafita provide positive signs. And in terms of team list for the Titans, Isaac Fasuamala-Aui should return to the side this week following a head knock. David Fafita is also listed to be available for selection next week in round 14, but may still find himself in reserve grade unless he miraculously resolves his issues with Des. Both Thormore and Tino Fa'asuamala-Aui will feature in Origin 1 on Wednesday, but I would assume they will back up. And as for the Storm, they fell narrowly to the Cronulla Sharks 31-26 in a high-octane clash at Shark Stadium. The Storm struck first through Grant Anderson in the opening minutes, and it seemed like they might have it all their own way, but the Sharks quickly responded, with Ronaldo Mulitalo and Aden Fanua-Blake crossing the line as Cronulla surged to a 25-12 halftime lead. Despite the Storm matching the Sharks with 5 tries apiece, goal kicking proved to be decisive. The Storm's attacking combinations, particularly on the edges, repeatedly tested Cronulla's reshuffled backline after the Sharks lost 2 outside backs early in the contest. However, Melbourne's efforts were ultimately undone by defensive lapses and missed opportunities in the first half, leaving them to chase the game in the final stages. The result still leaves the Storm searching for their first win in Cronulla since 2017. Now, in terms of teams list for Melbourne, Jack Howarth is listed to return from his shoulder injury this week. Cameron Munster, Xavier Coates, Harry Grant and Trent Liero will line up for Queensland on Wednesday night, but should be ready to go again on Saturday evening. Looking at the two sides head-to-head, the Storm, they have won 14 of the last 16 games against the Titans. Melbourne have also won 6 of the last 7 games at Cbus Super Stadium. And of course, I do like the Melbourne Storm here, 13+. Moving now to the second game on Saturday, we have the 7th placed North Queensland Cowboys taking on the 12th placed West Tigers at Queensland Country Bank Stadium. Alright, starting first with the Cowboys, who had their second bye of the season last week, but in round 11 suffered a disappointing 24-6 defeat against the Manly Sea Eagles at home at Queensland Country Bank Stadium, as Manly extended their perfect record at the ground and leapfrogged them on the NRL ladder. Despite dominating possession and territory in that first half, North Queensland struggled to convert their pressure into points, only managing to level the scores at 6-6 just before halftime through a corner try from winger Robert Derby. The call to drop Jake Clifford and move Jackson Purdue into 5'8" and Tom Dearden to halfback raised plenty of eyebrows pre-game, as the Cowboys weren't going as poorly as they had been to begin the season, and ultimately proved to be the wrong call, as the normally strong home team could only manage the lone try. I'm certainly interested to see what Todd Payton does this week, as he's really stuck now between a rock and a hard place. And in terms of teams list for the Cowboys, Ruben Cotter, Tom Dearden and Jeremiah Nanai will play in Origin 1 this week, but should be good to go on Saturday as well. Murray Taulagi picked up a calf injury that will keep him on the sidelines for a couple of weeks, and Jason Taumalolo is also on ice with a calf injury. And as for the Tigers, they also had the bye in round 12, but suffered a heartbreaking 22-12 point defeat to the South Sydney Rabbitohs in round 11 at Campbelltown Sports Stadium, despite a spirited performance that came down to the final minutes. The Tigers fell behind early, with Souths capitalising on sustained pressure after 3 consecutive attacking sets. West's task grew tougher when Lachlan Galvin was sin-binned for a professional foul in the 18th minute, allowing the Rabbitohs to extend their lead. However, co-captain Api Coruscant kept the home side in the contest with a brilliant solo effort try, slicing through the defence and leaving Latrell Mitchell grasping at air. He almost produced an identical try again late in the second half to close the gap to just 4 points, and Lachie Galvin appeared to have scored the match winner late, only for the bunker to rule a knock-on over the line after a desperate defensive effort from Campbell Graham. Kind of ironic too that is now going to be Lachie Galvin's final moments in the orange and black strip, but it's kind of poetic in some ways. Personally, I thought the Tigers did deserve to win that game, but either way they once again showed their improved resilience. And in terms of teams listed for the Tigers this week, Samuela Fainu, Vanua Pole and Gerald Skelton are all currently unavailable, with their returns yet to be determined. Looking at the two sides head-to-head, the Cowboys, they have won 5 of the last 6 games against the Tigers. They've also won 6 of the last 4 meetings at Queensland Country Bank Stadium. Alright, I do like the Cowboys here in this one, so I'm going to take North Queensland to bounce back by 1 to 12 points. I really do hope that Todd Payten goes back to Jake Clifford and Tom Dearden. Although I'm not hopeful, I do think the Cowboys on paper should be far too strong against a Tigers side who has certainly improved, but not quite where they need to be just yet. Alright, and the final game on Saturday night has the 9th placed Manly Sea Eagles taking on the 8th placed Brisbane Broncos at 4 Pines Park. Alright, and if we start first with Manly, who entered the contest against the Eels in 6th place and were seeking to complete a season double over the Eels, instead endured a disappointing night at CommBank, suffering a 30-10 point defeat to Parramatta. Manly opened the scoring in the 9th minute with Lehigh Hopewadi finishing a slick left edge move involving Tom Trbojevic and Tolu Kola. Hopewadi would go on to score both of Manly's tries, racking up an impressive 264 run meters and even threatened for a hat-trick. But outside of that, Manly's attack faltered under pressure and couldn't match the intensity of the Eels' young and hungry middle forwards. DCE was always going to be a big loss, but it was only compounded by injuries, including the early loss of half Jake Arthur to a head knock, Jake Simpkin to a hip pointer injury. Regardless though, the Sea Eagles looked flat throughout and on paper should have run riot against a far more inexperienced side, but they're clearly not united as a dressing room right now and are lacking a ton of passion. Now, in terms of teams list for Manly, DCE is the only Manly player involved in Origin, and given their recent form, it'll be unlikely that he doesn't back up for this now must-win game. Both Jake and Ben Trbojevic should return to the side this week, as will Josh Eloye and Toa Sipley. And as for the Broncos, they had their first bye of the season last week, but suffered a shocking 30-26 defeat against the St. George Illawarra Dragons in round 11 at Suncorp Stadium. The Broncos started strongly, racing to a 12-4 halftime lead thanks to early tries from Shibasaki and Ezra Mam, who was really impressive in his first outing of the season. Mam racked up over 100 run meters with 3 try assists and 5 tackle breaks, clearly looking to make amends to the club and their fans for his off-field incident through a strong performance. However, the Dragons responded with a determined second half performance, with the Broncos conceding 2 tries despite having the numerical advantage while Jaden Sewer was in the sin bin. Despite a late surge and a try from Jesse Arthurs that brought the Broncos within 4 points in the final minutes, Brisbane were unable to break through the Dragons' defence as time expired. The loss marks yet another setback for the Broncos, who are failing to perform to the best of their ability as pressure continues to mount on Michael Maguire and the playing group, only exacerbated now during the Origin period with key players taking on additional fatigue. And so speaking of those players, Pat Carrigan, Payne Haas and Jesse Arthurs are part of Origin 1 and could be included this week, although Payne Haas in particular has been nursing an injury. Both Selwyn Cobbo and Reece Walsh aren't available until round 13 at the earliest. Looking at the two sides head-to-head, the Broncos, they have won 5 of the last 7 games against Manly. This will, however, be the first time they've met at Brookvale since 2014, with the Sea Eagles winning 3 of the last 4 meetings at the ground. Man, this is a real coin flip game for me. I'm going to take the Broncos here by 1 to 12 points. I know they are missing a few troops and have a few players involved in Origin on Wednesday, but I do think they should be too strong for a Sea Eagles side who just has looked flat and disjointed for the past few weeks now. They had that good win against the Cowboys, but for me, I think with no confidence at all, the Broncos can bounce back by 1 to 12 points. Alright, moving now to the first of 3 games on Sunday again this week, and we start with the 6th placed South Sydney Rabbitohs taking on the 3rd placed Warriors at Accor Stadium. Alright, starting first with the Rabbitohs, who had their first bye of the season last week, but managed to survive a late scare against the West Tigers in round 11, hanging on to win 22 points to 12 in Campbelltown. The Rabbitohs set the tone early with Saliva Havili opening the scoring in the 10th minute after sustained pressure on the Tigers' line. Ewan Aitken extended the lead to 12-0 following a long-range move capitalising on a sin bin to Lockie Galvin. Alex Johnston's 197th career try in the 59th minute pushed the Rabbitohs further ahead, but the contest tightened when Tallis Duncan was sent to the sin bin and Appy Coruscant crossed for his second, narrowing the margin to just 4 points with 10 minutes remaining. The Tigers pressed hard, but Campbell Graham produced an all-effort play to force a game-winning knock-on from Lockie Galvin to keep Souths in front before Jai Arrow sealed the deal in the final minutes. Keon Kolomatangi was best on ground once again for the Bunnies, running for almost 300 metres, with 155 of those coming post-contact, and he's been absolutely incredible in that front row over the past few weeks, and in my opinion is really unlucky to miss out on an Origin recall. Now, in terms of teams list for the Bunnies, Mikaele Ravalawa is listed to return from a hamstring injury this week, while both Cody Walker and Jack Whiten aren't expected back until round 14. Campbell Graham is the only player involved in Origin, but likely won't get on the field, so will be ready to go on Saturday night. Alright, and as for my Wars, they went down to the Raiders at home, 16 points to 10. The match was played in wet and slippery conditions, with both teams showcasing strong defensive efforts. I thought the Warriors were defensively pretty good throughout, but once again lacked that spark on attack, often going for short side raids on that left edge when they've got such serious strike on their right. We certainly lacked a lot of strike off the bench and through the middle of the park, which ultimately I think proved to be the difference, and I do believe it's a bit of a different game if both our starting front rowers are on the park, but it is what it is. Certainly a much more competitive affair than it was in Las Vegas, and I suppose that's all we can really ask for. Now, in terms of teams list for the Wars, Mitch Barnett will play Origin on Wednesday night, but I would imagine will be ready to go come Sunday. James Fisher-Harris is also free to return from suspension this week, while Rocco Berry is still 1 or 2 weeks away as he nears a return from his hamstring injury. Looking at the two sides head-to-head, the Rabbitohs have won 14 of the last 16 games against the Warriors. That includes 8 of the last 9. They've only met once at a course since 2017, with the Warriors winning 34 points to 4 last year. As the saying goes, Wars all day, or you're an amateur, baby. Alright, moving now to the second game on Sunday, where we have the last placed Penrith Panthers taking on the 15th placed Parramatta Eels at CommBank Stadium. Alright, starting first with the Panthers, who endured a disappointing outing at Carrington Park, falling 25-6 to the Newcastle Knights in a match dominated by the visitors from the outset. Missing key stars Nathan Cleary, Isaiah Yeo, Brian To'o, Dylan Edwards and Liam Martin due to State of Origin commitments, the Panthers struggled to match Newcastle's intensity and execution, particularly in that first half that saw them concede 4 unanswered tries. By half-time, the Panthers trailed 24-0, a deficit they never looked likely to overcome. Despite a spirited effort in the second half, highlighted by a debut try for Harrison Hassett in the 58th minute, Penrith's attack was largely stifled and their defence continued to be tested by the Newcastle Knights. The loss leaves the Panthers in outright last on the ladder after 12 rounds, and although the loss can easily be attributed to the players missing for Origin, it really was the kind of performance the full-strength Panthers have dished up for a majority of the season. And in terms of teams list for Penrith, given their position on the ladder, I'd imagine all of their rep players will be in action for this now must-win game against the Parramatta Eels. Liam Henry has been suspended for 2 games for a high tackle on Fletcher Sharp. Luke Garner and Scott Sorensen should also return to the fold this week. And as for the Eels, they delivered a resounding 30-10 point victory over the Manly Sea Eagles on Friday night, reviving memories of their classic rivalry and potentially marking a significant turnaround in their season after a poor start. Despite missing key playmakers Mitch Moses and Zach Lomax to State of Origin duties, the Eels showcased impressive depth, with halfback Dean Hawkins orchestrating the attack with 4 try assists and 2 line break assists, while fullback Isaiah Ayongi ran for 258 metres and crossed for a second half try. The Eels, who had not led at halftime all season, went into the break up 16-10 after tries to Jordan Samrani, Papali'i and Jack Williams. They extended their lead in the second half with further tries from Ayongi and Jamin Hopgood. The win saw the Eels leap from last place on the ladder to 15th, notching their 4th victory of the season and signalling a potential resurgence as they head into the second half of the year. Now, in terms of teams for the Eels, Will Penasini suffered a Cat 1 HIA, so will be unavailable this week. Both Mitchell Moses and Zach Lomax will likely back up from Origin should they make it through unscathed. Looking at the two sides head-to-head, the Panthers, they have won 4 of the last 6 games against the Eels. But unfortunately for Parramatta fans, I'm going to curse your Eels and take them here to win by 1 to 12 points. I do like what I've seen from the Eels. They're certainly starting to find some connection. I love Moses back. I love Walker. I love Lomax on the wing. I love a lot about it. I can't lie. And the Panthers, although they might be boosted by Origin stars, they've looked flat all season. So I'm happy to take the gamble here at CommBank and take the Eels 1 to 12. Alright, the final game of round 13 has the 11th place Roosters taking on the 2nd placed Canberra Raiders at Allianz Stadium. Alright, starting first with the Roosters, who despite missing several key players due to Origin duties, delivered a commanding performance against the Sharks, securing a resounding 42 to 16 point victory at Industry Group Stadium. The Chooks started with a remarkable intensity, raising to a 14-0 lead within the opening 13 minutes thanks to a double from veteran winger Daniel Tupou, both set up by pinpoint kicks from young halfback Hugo Savala. Despite having a worse completion rate and more errors, the Tricolours led 20 points to 6 at half-time thanks to their ability to capitalise on the Sharks' fundamental errors. James Tedesco was once again immense at both ends of the field, while Mark Nawangani-Tawase continued to cement himself as one of the most dynamic and fearless outside backs in the comp right now. I've also got to give Hugo Savala a huge rap. His kicking game might not have the sort of finesse that the likes of Reynolds or Cleary does, but he's so consistent and has been turning the ball over in all the right places almost every set and is a massive underrated part of the Chooks' mid-season surge. Great signs for the Roosters after many, including myself, wrote them off. Now, in terms of teams list, for the Roosters, Nat Butcher is listed to return from a knee injury this week, while all of their Origin players should slot back in at home. And as for the Raiders, we're going to give those dirty grubs a week off. Looking at the two sides head-to-head, the Raiders, they have won 3 of the last 4 meetings. They're also yet to lose to the Roosters at Allianz, winning both games at the new stadium. But I am going to take the Roosters here by 1 to 12 points. I think the kicking game of Hugo Savala can match that of Jamal Fogarty's. I think on paper the Roosters have a really good side that's, again, starting to find some confidence up against the Raiders side, now missing a few key players. So for me, I think the Roosters can continue this bounce back and level their season at 6 wins and 6 losses. So I'm going to take the Chooks here, 1 to 12. Bang, just like that, we're done for another week. Thank you as always for watching. If you are still here, leave a like on the video, drop your tips and predictions in the comments down below, and I'll see you in the next one.